Hello people, this is Sonali, the Melodramatic Bookworm. If you've been here before, welcome back, and if you're new to my channel, welcome to the Melodramatic Bookworm family. I'm here today to talk to you about my recent reads, that is my May 2022 and June 2022 wrap-ups, and in these 2 months I read 9 books each. So in this video you'll be seeing a total of 18 books that I read. Some I liked, some I didn't like, some became favorites, and some I've already done reviews for. So if you'd like to know about them in detail, then I'll leave the links to those in the description box below. So since there are 18 books in this video and since this promises to be a long one, let's just get on with it and let me share with you the books that I read in May and June 2022. Okay, so since May comes before June, logically speaking, let's start off with the books that I read in May 2022. The first book that I finished in May was Pentiles, A Master of the Elemental Jewels by Kartika Sajeev. I've done a full video review of this book. If you'd like to go check it out, link will be here as well as in the description box below. This is a children's fantasy in which two kids have now moved to a new town because of their father's job. He has just got transferred, and in the previous book they talk about how they go on this whole adventure. They enter a house, a haunted house of sorts, and in which the younger brother is sort of on the brink of death and how the older brother saves him. And in this book, the older brother is celebrating his birthday, and the next day their father falls ill. He slips into a coma, and now these two brothers are entrusted with the duty of going to this place and procuring the elemental jewels, which will actually end up saving their father. This is a fun, fast-paced read, and only the language wasn't up to the mark, it felt to me, but you can get through this pretty quickly. The ending also is rather abrupt, but other than that, I really enjoyed reading the book and following the two brothers on their whole journey. The two brothers, along with their friends, they have gone on this whole adventure of sorts to save their father and on this quest to find the elemental jewels. It was fun. It was really fun. But just a couple of problems here and there, but then again it was completely okay. I flew through this book. By the way, the first book that I was supposed to talk about was Pentiles, The True Bond, which I've already given a short gist of, and everything else applies. Next up is At the Mountain of the Divine Tigress by Yashish Rathod. This is the third in the Frank Carter series and rounds up the whole thing, and this follows where the events of Macabre Expedition left off. But this follows Frank Carter and Randolph Smith on this whole expedition, on this whole quest of sorts, in which they have to gather the pellets of power in order to achieve something. Because there's a lot of history to this, I won't go into much detail, but there's time travel, and the Keeper of Time is now after these people because of certain events in the previous book, and in order to defeat this Keeper of Time, these two have to go on this whole quest and is aided by Athena, who is amazing, by the way. I leave the links to my reviews of all the books in the description box below if you'd like to go check them out. This book, like the series, has a great premise, but somehow the writing lets it down, and because of this, it sort of dampens the experience of reading the whole series, and also it felt a little abrupt towards the end, and it felt like there was too much going on, and everything got tied up too easily. Next up is One of Us is Next by Karen M. McManus. This is a sequel to One of Us is Lying, which I read earlier, and I was not a huge fan of this book. This following the death of Simon Kelleher, who was sort of a gossip king of sorts, who used to hold gossip over the heads of students and sort of blackmail them. Following all of that, now there's a new person in town who is now replicating whatever Simon did, and there's this whole new game of truth or dare going on, and now it's about to become dangerous. This just seemed like a rehash of the other book, of One of Us is Lying, and I was not a huge fan of that because I've already read things like this. I've already seen what can happen. I've already gone through the whole thing. This just seemed repetitive to me. It might seem creepy that the same thing is happening over again. If it happened in real life, obviously it would be a huge thing, but to read this was not that great of an experience. But it's, if you read it as a standalone kind of thing, if you haven't read that one before, then this is something I think you will be able to like. Next up is Charlie Savage by Roddy Doyle. Roddy Doyle is a Booker Prize winning author, and he is also, I think, a columnist for Irish Independent. And this book is a collection of a year's worth of all of his columns that he has written over there, in which Charlie Savage is a sort of a middle-aged guy who is trying to keep up with the modern world. And in all of these stories, Roddy Doyle narrates Charlie's life and his relationship with his wife and his best friend and his kids and the whole social media sensation thing that's going on. And it's funny. I laughed in a few places, especially because that Irish humor was there in here. It was okay. I mean, it was nothing out of this world, it felt like to me. It was funny, I had fun while reading it, etc, etc, etc. But I cannot say anything memorable about this book. This was a one-time read for me, and I'm not going to go back and reread this. I'm just glad I read it, since I had bought it 2 years ago and I finally got around to reading it. That's the only thing that's making me happy. Next up is Mythos by Stephen Fry, and this is such a well-written account of how the world started, how the gods emerged, how the titans emerged, how the gods emerged, and everything that happened as we know according to Greek mythology. And this was really fun to read. I loved Stephen Fry's humor. I love his way of writing, and to read about Greek mythology in his typical fashion of wit and humor was something else altogether. And there are so many characters in the Greek mythology, man. I had to highlight and highlight and highlight, and yet now I don't remember a word. There were so many names in my mind that they just got jumbled up and jumped right off the cliff, right off Olympus. And I'm like, I will reread this book because I want to remember, not need to, but I want to remember who all were there. It's not like a comprehensive account of Greek mythology, but it's fun. Next, You and Me on Vacation by Emily Henry. I'm not against Emily Henry or anything. I mean, she's fine. She writes well. I'm not saying she doesn't, but somehow it didn't work for me the way it worked for everybody. I've been seeing people go crazy about You and Me on Vacation, but I'm here like, okay. And that brings me back, circling to that point, right? Perspective. Everybody has their own opinions. I say this once every video so that people don't think I'm attacking them. I'm not. Okay, so this is the story of two people, two best friends, one who is a travel writer and who takes along her friend on vacations. Like, obviously she gets paid to go to places and write about them, etc, etc. But something has happened, and now that friend is not talking to her. I mean, there's no animosity as such, but something has happened that has made him do this. This whole story is in a non-linear narrative. It keeps bouncing back and forth, and that sort of gave me whiplash. But in places it was really funny. I really enjoyed their banter, and there was chemistry. There was great chemistry. I'll give them that. But other than that, it just felt okay. It wasn't like I'm jumping out of my skin to hug this book or something. It does get emotional. So if you are looking for a summary romance, then I would definitely recommend this. But it just didn't work for me the way I was expecting it to. Next is another dud, by the way. It's called The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley. I read the guest list, I think it was last year, and I liked it. I really liked how the author brought everything together, but this one was, oh, why in the whole wide world? I mean, there's a group of friends who's going to a remote Scottish lodge to spend New Year's, and there's this woman, Emma, who's organizing the whole thing, and every single one of these characters is a huge jerk by the way, in their own ways. Then obviously one of them gets killed. One of them gets murdered, and now obviously all of them are suspects. And we have to wait for about how many pages is it? For 380 pages to find out what it was. And when we find out what it is, it just made me. If I say anything else, I am going to be giving away the whole twist in this story, which I didn't like the twist all that much, and I think I saw it coming just 100 pages in. Not 100 pages, 150. But then again, there was nothing great about this book. In fact, I just felt meh about it because it just kept going around the same things over and over again. There's one character who's a complete jerk, and in order to show her to be a complete jerk, another one starts explaining, and in that process you find out that character is also a complete jerk, and then another person starts explaining all of this, and then you realize that person who is explaining all of this, or rather who is watching everything, observing everything silently, and who is like proper perfection, is actually behind all of this. The guest list was also something similar to this, by the way. It was people attending a wedding on an island, and everybody gets stranded and people get killed. So I think there's a recipe of sorts going on. Like Karen McManus did the same thing with One of Us is Lying and One of Us is Next. Lucy Foley did the same thing with the guest list and this one. Although the guest list was very much better than this, it felt like to me, but this I wouldn't recommend. Oh, next is a book, the last book that I read in May, which I absolutely loved. Like, I've been raving about this. If you watched my media book freakout tag video, you'll see that I've spoken for about like a long time about it, and I also did a long book discussion post on my blog, so if you'd like to go check that out, link will be in the description box below. And the book I'm talking about is In Other Words by Jhumpa Lahiri. As we know, Jhumpa Lahiri is a fabulous writer. She is someone who took a shine to Italian, and she started learning it, and she dedicated herself so much to learning Italian, and she's written her experiences of learning that language in this book, and every single page that I turned, I related to it. I've already mentioned before that I'm learning a new language, which I'm obviously not comfortable sharing right now, but I'm learning a new language, and that whole process, it sort of sat so well with me, and I just felt like she was speaking what I was feeling, and I just love this book. I annotated the heck out of this book. I highlighted the heck out of this book. There are so many. I think I've already shown. I'm not going to do it again, but there are, like, I'm going to go back to this book over and over and over again because of how much comfort it gave me. It told me that I was not alone, and I am not alone in this quest to learn a new language. And you can see how worked up and excited I'm getting at the very thought of this book, but this is that kind of a book for me. And Jhumpa Lahiri is now one of my absolute favorite authors, and I'll do anything for her. Anything. You want me to move to Italy? I'll move. I'll come. I'll learn Italian for you. Now on to the books that I read in June 2022, and there are 9 books that I read in June. First up is A Botanist's Guide to Parties and Poisons by Kate Khawari, and this is the story of Saffron Everly, I think, and she is an assistant to a botany professor in 1923. And you can imagine the amount of sexism, workplace sexism that came with her being in such a position during that time. And now her professor is accused of murder, and Saffron has to now go on this whole quest to find clues and to make sure to prove that her professor hasn't done anything wrong. He hasn't committed the murder. And I really liked reading this book. It was fun in a lot of places. It gave a sense of adventure. There are a lot of botany terms. The author has done her research well, and she uses all of them to the maximum extent, especially when it comes to this murder by poisoning that's happened. It gave me Agatha Christie vibes, because as we know, Agatha Christie used poisons in her stories, and to read this book on the whole about botanical poisons, I mean, it was fun, but it was not quite there. And Saffron can be quite bullheaded in some places and quite oblivious, and she makes some bad decisions, but other than that, it was pretty okay. And I would definitely recommend this as a historical mystery thriller of sorts. Next up is The Loneliness of Hirabaru by Arupa Patangya Kalita, and translated from the Assamese into English by Ranjita Biswas. This is a collection of short stories set in Assam, and it shows us the lives of women in Assam, their relationship with their families and with community as a whole. And I really enjoyed this collection. I mean, halfway through I was of the mind that the translation wasn't that great, and I was sort of nitpicking on everything that was happening, everything that I was reading. But then again, these stories do have the impact, so I'm thinking that isn't going to be that big of a problem when it comes to the stories actually being impactful. And I would highly recommend this book because it shows us a glimpse into the lives of Assamese women, and how things have changed through modern times, and how some things have remained the same, and how it affects them as a whole. So good. I was not expecting to like this book this much, but to see everything through these eyes, through these words, it was something else altogether, which is why this is going to be on top of the books that I would recommend by Indian authors, translated literature especially. Next up is House of Salt and Soros by Erin A. Craig. This is a standalone fantasy in which there were originally 12 sisters in the palace at Highmoor, but there seems to be a curse on them, and the sisters have been dying off one by one. One has just died when this book started, and a funeral is taking place and all of that. But there are doubts in Annalie's mind, who is one of the sisters, that her sister was murdered and did not actually fall off the cliff or fall off on the rocks as is assumed. And now she has to go on this whole journey of trying to find out who exactly did all of this. This story is so weird in some places because you have to decide if you are going to take the narrator at their word or not, and so many things keep changing, they keep morphing into one another, and you don't know what's the truth, and you can't tell what is what until the very end. You go along with Annalie, you go along with a story, and you try to find pieces in which you try to sit with her and understand what she is trying to say, and you do to a certain extent, but then again some things happen which sort of completely nullify her words. And I think that's how a sort of a thriller fantasy works of sorts. But there's a lot going on in here, and there's fantasy, so imagine some of the most outlandish things ever, and this book is that for you. I would recommend this book is creepy also, like you could even file it away in horror. I would file it away in horror because I'm such a scaredy cat and I get scared at the littlest of things. And I tried not to read this book at night because it's a very, very interesting read for sure. Next is this cute book by Madeline Miller. This is the story of Galatia, who is actually a sculpture sculpted by one of the most gifted sculptors of all time in ancient Greece, and she has been given the gift of life. And the sculptor thinks that since he was the one to sculpt her, and he has authority over her, and she has to do everything that he says. And now Galatia has to do everything in her power to not rile him up and to save their daughter. This was really good. I mean, it's a short read, obviously. It's like a maximum half an hour or 40-minute read, and I really liked it because Madeline Miller has that power. In just these few pages, she has combined so much about women empowerment, the strength, the determination that women have to do something, and the patriarchy, the sexism, the misogyny that has been coming on since ages, and everything is encapsulated in this single small book. It's great. Next up is Gardens of Love, Stories of a Marriage, written and illustrated by Meera Godbole Krishnamurti. And this is the story of a marriage, obviously, as is said from the tagline. And conversations are happening in different places. One is between the husband and wife. One is between the husband and his father. One is between the wife and her mother. And the last one is between the husband and wife again, and how they talk through their problems and how they come around trying to find a solution, and do they find a solution forms this entire story. I just felt like this book was really preachy in a lot of places. It didn't have to be. You don't have to be preachy in order to make a point, and it just every single dialogue that started, it sort of turned into you know what, I'm going to give you this pearl of wisdom, because by starting with a pearl of wisdom my words will have more weight. No. It got annoying after a certain extent. I mean, I read this in one sitting, that's a different matter, because there were illustrations and all. It was easy to read, but I somehow didn't find it all that impactful. It was like I said, it was preachy, it was draggy, and it just felt pretentious in a lot of places. Next up is Murder on the Links by Agatha Christie. In this book, Poirot receives a letter from Paul Renaud from France, and asking for his help and saying that he is afraid of his life. And when Poirot and Arthur Hastings, Poirot's Watson of sorts, they go there to help him, they find that this man has been murdered. Paul Renaud has been murdered, and during this whole investigation, his wife Eloise Renaud tells them that the masked men took her husband from their bed, and they took him out, and then he was murdered. And now there's a French detective also who is sort of a pain. Really, he's a jerk to Poirot and very disrespectful of sorts. But now this whole investigation has opened up. There are new characters coming every day, like the Renault's son, and then there's the neighbors, and the stories that come across from everywhere, and the woman that Hastings met on a train. Everything is about to come together. How will Poirot bring all of this together forms this entire story. I love Agatha Christie, okay? She is one of my favorite authors of all time, and she was the reason I got my first job, so I'll always be grateful to her for that. This was good, like typical Poirot investigation, in which every single thing you will not expect, and every time the French detective sort of came on scene and he started boasting about everything, I just wanted to punch him in the face on Poirot's behalf. But to see Poirot's calm and his we'll see later kind of attitude, it sort of cemented the belief that I had in him. I mean, this is typical Agatha Christie, and I really enjoyed reading it. I mean, it's not on par with Roger Ackroyd or Orient Express, but it's great. Next up is My Shit Therapist and Other Mental Health Stories by Michelle Thomas. This is a non-fiction in which Michelle Thomas talks about her battle for depression, and she also tells stories about people who have reached out to her and have spoken about their mental health and about their experiences with not good therapists, like bad therapists, and the way even therapists are dismissive of mental health issues. It's all given in this book. I mean, yes, she sort of uses a few questionable words, and she has addressed that in the beginning. She has said that since she is directing them at herself, it's a sort of, for lack of better language, kind of thing, and to not take it in the way that she is dismissive of mental health as well. And she talks about her life, her job, her career, and how everything affected her mental health, and how it all came together, or how she has been working to bring it together. The writing is good, but for a non-fiction like this, I can't really critique anything else, because this is her personal experiences. Even the people who have reached out to her, they have told their personal experiences in this book. So I'm just going to say that this is eye-opening for sure, because it sheds light on the situation in the UK with the NHS, and we get to see the number of ways in which therapists and psychiatrists and psychologists sort of dismiss mental health issues. The way that this issue is universal, it just sort of annoyed me to no end, because it's unfortunately it's there. It exists, this problem. Oh god, next is a thriller. And you can see from my expression why I'm so that I'm really annoyed, and that we are back to square one when it comes to thrillers. The book I'm talking about is My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing, and in this couple, in order to keep the fun in their marriage, have now turned into serial killers. Yeah, they have now turned into serial killers. Fun. Okay, if it was just that, I would have been okay with it. Like really, I would have gone like Gone Girl type, I have to put my reasoning aside kind of thing, and I would have gone ahead with it. But there are so many problems with this, so many loopholes in this story, and that ending was so abrupt. Like, she finished it in about 5% of the book. It was done, not even 5%, just a couple of pages, and everything was wrapped up like this. I'm like, why did you build it up like this to such an extent? Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself again, but they have become serial killers, right? And now what they have this great plan, and now an old serial killer is coming back, and now they have to fix all of them together. But there is something that's happening behind the scenes. What is it? That is what this whole story is. That is what My Lovely Wife is. Imagine what's going to happen. And in the end, the way people grow consciences just because something has happened to them and not to other people, I'm like, hey, hypocrite. Hypocrite you are. I don't even want to say anything, because it's going to give away the plot of the story, but it was not for me. No. Okay, last but not the least, Mohini The Enchantress by Anuja Chandramouli. This has been on my TBR for ages and ages, and I finally got around to reading it. This is told from the perspective of Mohini, who is an avatar of Vishnu, and how she saw everything go down. The Hindu mythological characters and everybody, the gods, the devas, the asuras, the kings on earth, demigods, and everything that's going on, and how she plays a role in it. Of course, for the first half of the book, I think she was just a narrator. She was just looking down and narrating everything that was happening, but throughout it was rather powerful to watch her narrate the events that happened from a neutral perspective, and to actually see the wrong for what it is and not see it through a patriarchal lens. And I really enjoyed it. There was one place in which I smiled. It was 3 a.m. and it was making me think, this book. That was how powerful it was. And the writing can become a little tedious, in my opinion. I always maintain that, because I've already done a review of one of the author's earlier works, and I said the same thing in that video as well. If you are giving it some time and patience, then this will be a great read for you. I would highly recommend this. So those, plus the ebooks that I was talking about, were all the books that I read in May and June 2022. So what did you think of this video? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Which of these books have you read? Which ones do you want to read? Which books did you read in May and June? Which were your favorites? Which were your least favorites? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you like this video, please like it and share it to spread the word. And if you like my content and would like to see more from me, don't forget to hit subscribe and click on the bell icon beside the subscribe button to get notified as and when I post new videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Until next time, keep reading, keep watching, and add melodrama to your life.